Hello, everyone. Welcome to another day of class. And today we're going to be talking about type in Photoshop. So, this is one of my favorite subjects. I love typography and using type, and so I'm really excited to go into this. So, the type tools are what you will use when you want to add text to a Photoshop document. The type tool comes in four different variations and allows users to create both horizontal and vertical type. Note that whenever you create type in Photoshop, a new type layer will be added to your layers palette. So first off, let's download our example photo for this lesson. Silhouette of a person standing on a hill under night sky by Movo Yagi. So let's go over how to create text first off. So to do so, you'll want to select the horizontal type tool, which is the keyboard shortcut of T from the tools palette. It's the one that kind of looks like a T, just in a serif font. Now, you can click and drag your mouse while using the type tool to create a text frame. You can release your mouse when it is the size you desire. Don't worry if you decide to resize it later, you can always resize it later. However, if you only want a single line of text, such as for a book cover or an author, or you just don't want to bother with a text frame, you can simply click to create a text line or text point. Now you can use the Tool Options palette or the Character palette to select your desired font and font size and various other options. We'll be going over them later on in this lesson. Then simply type your text, and then you can select the Move tool to deactivate the Type tool and move your text box to the desired location on your document. Now, how do you edit the type? To edit type, you select the type layer that you wish to edit from the Layers palette. Then select the type tool from the tools palette. This will change the sort of highlight window of the type tool from like a solid line to a dashed line. Now click on the text in the document using your type tool and highlight it. Then you can simply type or use the tool options palette or character palette to edit the text. Now you can easily edit the size of the type frame by selecting the type layer and the type tool, just as we did in the previous one, to be able to get into that editable interface for type. And then you just want to activate the type frame so you get that kind of like dashed border. And then you just move your cursor to a corner handle of the frame until you see a double-sided arrow, and then you can click and drag the frame to your desired size. Much like how we did with the crop tool earlier, if you move your mouse a little bit outside of that, and then you'll change your cursor to like a little 90-degree angle arrows, and that'll allow you to also rotate your type frame as you want it. So there are various variations of type tools. There's the horizontal type tool, which is kind of like your standard. That'll be your bread and butter sort of type tool. You type on a horizontal line. However, sometimes you want to do a vertical type, such as if you're trying. One of my students last semester, she wanted to imitate like a translated cover for a Japanese manga, and so she did a vertical type for the title of that manga to kind of imitate that sort of uh, translated feel. That was very common in her genre. You can also use it if you're making like a marquee sign for a window in an illustration. And there are various other places where you might use vertical type, but it's definitely not as common as horizontal type. Then we have the two mask tools. We have the vertical type mask tool and the horizontal type mask tool. These do the same things as the previous two, except that they then when you create them, they create a selection of the type rather than live text. And then those selections can then be used to create masks or clipping masks or various other things. Admittedly, I don't use these ones a whole lot. If I'm wanting to like create a clipping mask or something, I'll just use normal text and then do a clipping mask above that. Speaking of clipping masks, we'll cover that in the future as well. Okay, so let's just focus on the horizontal type tool. Okay, so when you have the type tool options palette will always appear whenever a type tool is selected. This is where you can perform basic formatting for your type, such as changing font, font size, alignment, and color. These are your simple, condensed options. More full options can be found in the Properties panel when you have a type layer selected or in the character and paragraph windows. So let's go over the different parts of the type options bar. First off, there's the font select. This opens up a list of fonts. By default, it shows the fonts installed locally on your computer. However, by selecting more fonts at the top of the font dropdown, you open up many additional fonts available through Adobe Cloud. On the left-hand side of the font dropdown, you can also see a list containing different font categories such as serif, sans serif, or decorative. This is the font filter. The font filter can allow you to narrow down your font choices if you're looking for a particular type. In the More Fonts tab, this font filter expands to contain style tags, such as Art Deco, Stencil, and Wedding. As there are many, many fonts to browse through the More Fonts tab, this can help you narrow it down if you're looking for a font that fits a specific style as well as category. Next in the options bar is font style. This, this allows you to choose different stylistic variations of the chosen font. This can be as ordinary as bold and italic variations, but it can also be a wide and wild amount of variations depending on the font's author. Then we can adjust the font size. This changes the font size by point size. By default, point size is the same as pixel size, so don't be worried about any sort of conversions. Next is the type alignment. This aligns your text either left, center, or right. In a text box, this will be limited to the box, while a text line will be oriented around the originating point. I definitely encourage you to kind of experiment with that if you're kind of confused about what that all means. But if you've used any sort of document processor, such as Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you should be pretty familiar with how type alignment works. Then we have type color. This allows you to change your text color. This can be changed per character in a line or paragraph of text. Just whatever you select and choose a color, we'll make those that color. Then we have the dynamic text options. This automatically resizes and reflows re-editable text to fill the shape of the text bounding box. It's a really neat and new feature of the most recent versions of Photoshop that I'm definitely excited to experiment with now that I know that it exists, because this will be really great for, changing, like adjusting bits of text on the fly. Then we have the warp text feature. This allows you to warp your text in many different styles, like an arch or a flag or a fisheye effect. It's kind of an interesting warping effect, but just keep in mind that it does heavily affect the legibility of text, which can definitely be a detriment because, text is communication. So warping it too much can definitely affect how readable your text is. So make sure your text is readable. Next, we have the toggle character and paragraph panels. And this does exactly what it says. It'll toggle these two panels in the right-hand toolbar. And this is where the detailed text options are. The character panel manages most of the styling of the text, such as the font, the size, and the color, while the paragraph panel manages how the text looks as a block. The alignment, space before and after, bullets and numbering, and that sort of thing. Then the next two are just like whether you want to cancel your text or to commit your text. And so if you press the cancel button or the escape or delete button on your keyboard, that'll remove any changes you've made to the text in that sort of editing session. And an editing session starts with you creating the text box. So if you create a text box, type in it, and then press escape, that'll actually get rid of your text box and get rid of the entire text layer. Alternately, commit does the exact opposite. When you press commit or end or return, that'll confirm all the changes you've made to the text layer. So these basic options will cover a majority of your needs. However, if you need a little bit more finessing, you'll need to enter the character and paragraph windows. This is where we get into the meat of the type tool, as there are many options for both individual characters in a typeface, but also for groups of letters and then paragraphs. Let's get into it. So with the character window, the first few options are the same as you'll see in the top options bar for a text layer: the font select, font style, and font size. The rest of the options in the character window allow you to better refine your text to get it to look exactly as you want. So the first option, aside from those first three, is to set leading. This adjusts the space between lines of text. This is typically best kept on auto for beginning work, but if you wish to adjust it, keep the value between 1.2 and 1.5 of the font size for maximum legibility. As you improve as a designer, you can definitely start breaking this rule to start experimenting. Just remember that with type, you generally want to keep legibility as your foremost concern. The next option is to set the kerning, and this adjusts the space between two single letters. Most of the time, you can just keep this in optical and it'll be perfectly fine. But if a manual adjustment is needed due to a badly formatted font, or you need it for a specific stylistic need, simply make sure your type cursor is between two letters, and then you can manually adjust it by adjusting the numbers in this field. And then we have the set tracking. This adjusts the space between all selected letters. This is often used for stylistic test spacing. Setting this too high or too low can also affect legibility, however. Then we have the vertical scale and horizontal scale. These stretch the font vertically or horizontally to basically warp the text in that direction. Try to avoid these unless it's absolutely necessary. Distorting the fonts in this way can affect legibility and also compromises the design of the font. If you want a taller or wider font, try and find a different font that fits your needs. There's a lot of some keywords you might want to look for are condensed or wide or even tall. There People will usually name the fonts as they are, but definitely try not to use these ones because they really can distort the text in a really unappealing way. So the next option is the baseline shift. This shifts the selected text above or below, depending on positive numbers or negative numbers, the baseline of text. And the baseline of text is basically when you create text, there's like this line that all the letters kind of invisibly sit on, and that's your baseline. And so this will shift your letters above or below that. And so the next options that are all like these little buttons in a horizontal line are different stylistic effects that you can apply to your text. However, something to note is that you have limited control over how these effects look. You can't change them much, if at all. They're just toggles on and toggles off. So first off, we have faux bold, and this creates a bold effect on the selected text kind of by outlining it. Try not to use this one. Use the font's bold styling instead up in the font style dropdown. Or if your font doesn't have a bold, then you might want to look for another font. Similarly, we have faux italic, which creates an italic effect on the selected text by giving it a slight slant. Also try to avoid this one as it does compromise the integrity of the font. Use the styling of italic or find a different font. The next few options are totally good to use though. We have all caps, small caps, superscript, and subscript. All caps converts all the selected text to capital letters, while small caps converts them all into capital letters, but the lowercase letters will be little smaller capital letters, kind of like some old Roman text and that sort of stuff. It can give a kind of like gravitas, especially when you're using it with a serif font. And then superscript and subscript basically reduce the size or they both reduce the size of the selected text, and then superscript moves it above the baseline while subscript moves it below the baseline. You'll see this a lot in like mathematics or if you're trying to leave notes in like large bits of text. You probably won't use this a lot in Photoshop, however. Then we have our last two options are underline and strike through. And these are also ones I want to encourage you to avoid unless absolutely necessary. The reason why is these ones don't allow you a lot of control. You can't really control the stroke underneath the underline or the stroke through the text and strike through. And so if you want them to look differently or if you want the lines to be thicker, thinner, have more spacing, you can't really adjust this, which can be really frustrating and won't get you the appearance that you want. So I definitely encourage you to use the shape tool, which is the keyboard shortcut U, to change it to the line shape tool and use that to create your lines for however you might need them in your text if you want to do an underline or a strike through effect. Definitely, if you do want to do these in your book cover, send me a message and I'll gladly talk you through this since we won't be covering the shape tool for another week or two. So the next options in a horizontal line involve the use of alternates. Alternates are alternate characters in a font to fit specific looks or needs, such as ligatures, special title characters, or fractions. Each of these is a toggle on or off, much like the above style options. Every typeface has a different number of these available. Some of them will have none, while others will have some or all of them. Grayed out options are not available for your selected typeface. So first off, we have our standard ligatures. These are practical, readability-focused letter connections that prevent awkward collusions. Things like F and I, F and L, FF, and etc. They're part of most modern fonts and are usually on by default. Then we have contextual alternates. These ones are alternate characters included in some script typefaces to provide better joining behavior between letters. You might see this used if you're doing like wedding invitations and the like. Then we have discretionary ligatures. These are decorative or stylistic ligatures that are used to add flair or evoke historical type aesthetics. Examples include like ST and CT, TH, or custom ornamental joins. These are off by default because they can change the tone of text and aren't meant for body copy, really. Then we have a swash. A swash is a decorative style of drawing with a certain flair, which can be used as an alternate to the standard drawing of characters. These are often reserved for the first letter in a line of type rather than using them for every word in the line. Then we have the stylistic alternates. These offer alternates to different characters that can change the style of the text, just like it says. Then we have the titling alternates, which are usually employed when setting larger type, and almost always are capital letters or start with capital letters. Then we have ordinals. Ordinals Ordinal numbers tell the position of something in a list or series, like first or second. Selecting the ordinal you typed and clicking on the ordinals button will change the letters after the number for some fonts. And then lastly, we have fractions. Certain frequently used fractions are pre-built as one character glyphs, such as 1/2 or 3/4 or similar other ones. The last two options at the bottom of the character window are a drop down for your selected language and a drop down for how you want the text to render. Each rendering option displays the text slightly different. Feel free to experiment if you like, but I find working with crisp, which is the default, it works just fine. Unless you're working in really, really small sizes in which strong or sharp might work better for legibility purposes. If you're running into legibility issues, definitely experiment with these ones because it can definitely help the font work. Okay, now we need to talk about the paragraph window, which luckily has a few less options than the character window. So the first few options in the paragraph window are your standard alignment options: left align, center align, and right align. The next four are justified alignments, which means they will adjust the space between words to ensure that it fits edge to edge in the text box. Justified alignments aren't available for a text line and only for text boxes because a text line doesn't have, a right edge and a left edge for it to go from. The next three options allow you to adjust the positioning of paragraphs of text. You might not work with paragraphs of text much in Photoshop, but if you work in InDesign or other detailed document creators, you will find the same options. It's good to get familiar with them now if you aren't. So we have indent left margin, which indents or moves the left side of the text box by the amount listed. Then we have indent right margin, which indents the right side of the text box by the amount listed. Lastly, we have indent first line, which indents only the first line, such as for use with old style paragraphs. You might see this in books or other documents with a lot of text. The next two options have to do with the space before or after a paragraph. Adjusting the space after a paragraph especially can help you refine the amount of space between paragraphs more than simply pressing return twice. Then we have the hyphenate checkbox, which is an option for the text to hyphenate or not when it faces a long word in a small space. In the example above in Canvas, you can see how the word vermin gets broken in two to maintain the justified paragraph spacing, while it is simply moved to the next line in the left aligned version. Hyphenating words reduces legibility, as some people can find it difficult to piece the separate words together into one. But removing hyphenation altogether can leave large gaps in text, especially if you're working with larger technical words. Check or uncheck the hyphenate checkbox depending on what makes the paragraph flow better, or depending on your audience's needs. Lastly, we have options for bullets and numbering. If you've used a word processor in the last few decades, you should be familiar with these. They left indent your text and add a marker, such as a number or a bullet, to note new paragraphs. They can be very useful for lists, but often you are better served by creating them manually using text boxes and shape tools. Okay, lastly, we have the properties panel. This is the panel that's right above your layers panel. And so the properties panel above layers in the essentials workplace, there are many different collapsible options for a type layer. To have the same general options as the character and paragraph windows, have the character, type options, and paragraph options open, and the rest can be closed. But definitely, if you're looking for particular needs, such as bullets or certain language text needs, you'll want to go and explore those other options, or you can simply make sure that you have the character and paragraph windows available to you. Okay, now as for our assignment, we're going to do a little bit more of a design assignment rather than you just showing me a text box. So I want you to create an album cover out of our example image that we started with at the beginning of this assignment. I want you to use the crop tool to crop it to a square, and you can choose what part of the photo you want visible within this crop. And then I want you to create at least one adjustment layer to adjust the colors of this image. And then using the type tool, I want you to create two separate type layers. One that reads These Forgotten Stars as an album name, and then the Indigo Fortune as the band or artist name. Use a different font for each type layer and maybe mess with them to make sure that they kind of like complement each other. Move and arrange the text in your image in a way that is visually pleasing or interesting to you. And then feel free to recrop your image if you feel the text doesn't fit to your satisfaction. It's always okay to adjust if something isn't working. Okay, and then once you've completed your little album cover, I want you to name it with first name, last name, and then type assignment.psd. For example, I would name mine Susie Crane type assignment.psd. And then I want you to put this in your AVC 177 Google Drive assignments folder. Then once you've put it in your assignments folder, copy a link to that file or to that folder and put it into this assignments text box. Once you've done that, submit it and we'll be all good. Now, I know that was a lot of information, and this is probably one of my longest lectures to date, but I hope that you all feel that you kind of understand the type tool. It's definitely going to be one of your most important tools, especially in this class, or if you're focusing on any sort of design or comicking or any sort of thing where you might be working with text a lot. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture. I hope that you all have a great day. Take care of each other, and I will talk to you next time.